Okay, we're live. Good morning. Hi. Thanks for joining us in our Wednesday live stream at SilviaFindings, Canada's premier source for findings, pendants, rings, clasps, wire, jump rings, sheet metal. I was trying to think too many things at one time. We do this live stream every morning, every Wednesday morning from 10:30 Pacific to, well, I guess, whenever. I know that usually I go way over an hour, which we were supposed to keep it under an hour. And I think that today might be one of those days where I managed to keep it under an hour. We'll see. I'm pretty sure. We're going to do something a little bit different today. But before I talk about that, just a few housekeeping notes. Remember, like always, if you share this live stream with friends, you will send you one of these polishing cloths. So take a minute and share this with your friends on Facebook. I think eventually these videos are going to end up on YouTube. So once we are on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel or wherever the button is going to be when it's on YouTube. Just so you always are notified when we're doing when we add a video. I don't know if we'll be doing live streaming on YouTube, although that I know that's certainly a possibility. Some other notes just about the state of things. Obviously, we're doing these live streams because we miss seeing you guys at shows that we used to do practically every other weekend, 20 something shows a year. Because of the global pandemic, obviously, all of these shows have been canceled. But we still need a way to, connect with you guys. And this has sort of evolved from the first ones we did it. We weren't really sure what we were doing. We were kind of making it up as we go. And now we're having a little bit of a better grasp on what we're doing. And we're still going to be doing those live streams where it's mostly showcasing products, and we're going to do those in sections. We'll start maybe with pendants, and we'll do a couple pendants each week, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the idea is to eventually have an online catalog of all of the stuff, explaining what they are, explaining how they work, and it's a little bit more detailed and maybe more intimate than it would be just looking at a picture on a website. So that's exciting for that to happen. But we're also occasionally going to intersperse those with what we're doing today. Today is going to be kind of a hybrid live stream, different from what we've been doing. We're going to do a little how-to stuff, a little science, a little jewelry technique stuff, which is always fun. But just going back, again, shipping is pretty much a disaster everywhere. If you're just regular post shipping, it's just getting slow and slower. I kind of thought that eventually, as the pandemic wore on, that things would get better. I've discovered that if we ship stuff overseas, that every time it goes into a new country, because we ship through a service called Chit Chats, which ultimately starts its postal service life in part of the U.S. Postal Service. The company we use trucks it down over the border, and then it gets shipped to wherever. Same process if we're doing shipping into the States. They just ship it across the border, and then they mail it from Washington State, which is just south of us in BC. But every other country that it goes through, every time it gets to a new country, it seems as though the packages sit in quarantine for 2 weeks, for 14 days, 10 or 14 days. So it is what it is. I hate to say it like that. I think they're still quoting for overseas shipments into Europe. I know we just did one to Australia. That they're saying up to 75 days, which I could probably swim to Australia faster than 75 days, but that's neither here nor there. So just beware, shipping might be long unless you pay for an upgraded, expedited service like DHL or something, which is still a great option if you're spending enough money and the ratio of freight to merchandise is not too egregiously high. You can definitely use that as an option. And those I know that we use DHL mostly, and into the States sometimes it's next day delivery. Into Europe things have been 2 and 3 days delivery, which is awesome. So there's that. I did have a question that I wanted to talk about first before I go on to the cool parts of the presentation this morning. A customer asked about. She was concerned about ordering from us because we're in Canada. She was concerned about ordering from us in the States because she was afraid that her order, which ultimately came to, what was a small order, like $60 or $70, she was afraid that she was going to pay duties and taxes and stuff like that. And the way it works is because our shipments get trucked across the border and then get entered into the U.S. Postal Service system from the U.S. They don't. I mean, they go through customs, but they don't go through customs in a way where the shipper has to present documents to the customs service. For shipments under $300, there's no need for any documentation whatsoever. It just goes through. And I'm not sure, maybe this was part of the original NAFTA or this new free trade agreement. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, under $300, there's no need for documentation at all. Over $300, but up to $800 US dollars, there's no duty and no taxes due. If it ships by a postal service, it still has to go through customs, but because they do all that stuff automatically in the U.S. Postal Service, just I don't know, they tell customs, "Hey, look, we've got it. Don't worry about it." There's no documentation, so there's no. Well, there is documentation, but there's no entry fee. So you're not going to pay duties, taxes, or entry fees for stuff shipped by the post. If we ship stuff up to $800 by courier service like FedEx or we use DHL mostly because we worked out a great deal with them. Up to $800 or more than $300, but up to $800, they will charge you an entry fee. You won't get charged duties or taxes, but they have to fill out the paperwork to enter it through customs. So you are going to pay that. I think they charge 12 or 15 bucks for that. So just beware of that. And then if it's over $800, you're going to pay duties or taxes no matter what country you live in, just so you know. But I think the duty on all of our stuff, the duties are only 5%, I think, according to the harmonized system of tariffs. So it's not much. It's just a little bit more. And if you're already spending over $800 on the stuff, I think 5% isn't really going to be a deal breaker for you. It might not. But call us. We'll work out a deal. Anyway, so today we're going to do a little soldering demo, a little soldering technique, a little soldering primer, maybe. We have these awesome line of findings. We call them jeweler's settings. That are just the settings, just the let me just show you here. I've got one set up on my soldering board here already. So these little jewelry settings, right? This is a one for a 7x9mm oval, and I've got a lovely little 7x9mm cabochon here, a little lapis cabochon. And these settings, we've got them, and I'll show them to you later. We've got those settings in like 9 different styles. And the sizes, the round ones, we have from 3mm up to 14mm. And the ovals, we have as small as 3x5mm all the way up to 13x18mm. So, they get pretty huge. And pretty much any even-sized, number in between that, we have the setting for it. Now, these kind of settings are, really popular. I know that when I used to own a jewelry school in the States, I used to buy similar settings like this for the classes that we taught all the time. And for some reason, I think these haven't quite permeated into the zeitgeist of jewelry makers in Canada here. So I'm going to show you these, and I think maybe it might be a little bit because of how we design them and how we potentially made them easy for use. And people are used to a little more DIY stuff instead of a little, less, jewelry fabrication-y stuff. I'm going to show you how they work the way we intended them to be used, and how you can use them in anything. You're making some beautiful, pendant or necklace or something, and you've got this luscious piece that you've been working on, and you thought, oh, but wouldn't it be nice if I had this little 4 millimeter accent stone in the corner of this piece? Buy a 4 millimeter, setting. We've got lots of different kinds, which I'll show you later. Solder it right to your piece, and boom, there you set the stone in it. You don't have to learn how to make the baskets settings. Um, is my point. And there's lots of them, and I'll just show you them. And there's lots of really cool uh, options. We also have these settings. Let me just show you. There's a little peg on the bottom, a little square peg on the bottom, if you could see that, right? Get this maybe there. Oops, wrong one. Oh, there we go. So there's a little square peg on there, on the inside of that. And we've got a couple of these ring shanks that have a corresponding square hole in the top. And I remember at the time we were designing these, we were debating whether to keep the pegs round or square. The idea behind having round ones is maybe you can orient the setting, in some weird angle, however you want. But the option is still there to do that. I'm not going to do it for you, but you could definitely, set this in there, then twist it into whatever, crazy diagonal angle you want, and that would still work. But I'm going to show you, just I guess how to use it. We've got so the ring shanks we've got this lovely just a little bit bigger than 3, maybe 3¼ millimeter band. We've got a smaller one, little 2 millimeter band, right? Just a plain band. And then we've got this other one that's also 2 millimeter. That's special. I'm going to show you how this works a little bit later. There are a couple of setting styles that fit gorgeously in here. I mean, it's outstanding the way it looks. But I'm going to do one of the other ones. I'm going to use this bigger one because it's a little bit easier to see. Now, soldering is, the jewelry technique that everybody who does anything beyond stringing beads or, setting stones in pre-made findings, which most of our findings are. But soldering is the first technique that you should learn as a jeweler, as a fabricator. Because, it's always great to buy different things, but wouldn't it be great if you could, solder pieces together, or, solder the links closed in a chain to make it more secure, or just solder things that you didn't think were, possible to put together. We have a customer, and I keep forgetting. I keep meaning to have an image of this ready, but a customer took one of our big wide tube beads and soldered one of our settings to the front of it and set a stone in it. And now this beautiful, big, gorgeous, centerpiece. And I wouldn't have thought to do that, but everybody has their own idea. And wouldn't it be great if I could put this to that? And the answer is yeah. So learn how to do it. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you how to solder today, a little bit. I think. Jewelry soldering, silver soldering, what we're going to be doing today is not the same as the electrical soldering, where you have a soldering iron or a soldering gun. Those low temperature solders work by melting and flowing onto the surface of the whatever they're joining together into the nooks and crannies. They work almost like a hot glue, but they always essentially get stuck to the surface of the piece. If you hit it with a hammer, if you soldered a jump ring closed with that kind of solder and you hit it with a hammer, the solder wouldn't expand. It would just crack and break, and the thing would break open. So what we want to do is we want to have a metal that can melt into the crystalline structure of the pieces we're joining together. All, the jewelry metals, silver, gold, copper, nickel, zinc, palladium, titanium, rhodium, platinum. Actually, I don't think rhodium does. I'd have to double check, but neither here nor there. You know, silver. We're talking about silver. So silver, gold, you know, those kind of jewelry metals, they all have a crystalline structure. And when the metal is most soft, the crystalline communities are aligned in nice, tight, interlocked, you know, communities, and there's big gaps between them. So there's room for these crystalline communities to fold into each other, and the metal feels kind of malleable, right? Now, the more you work with these things, you know, hammering them, stretching them, bending them, whatever you're doing in them, the crystalline communities begin to break apart, and the gaps in between these communities get filled in with unaligned pieces of the metal, and the metal becomes less malleable, less able to bend. And eventually you could work harden a piece of metal to the point where it just breaks. It can't bend anymore, can't flex anymore. So like if you take a spoon, right, and you bend it back and forth enough times till it breaks, that's what you're doing. You're work hardening the metal to the point where there's no room for the crystalline communities to fold into each other anymore. Now, the nice thing about most of these metals, silver, copper, gold, I know all these metals do this, is if you heat them up past a certain temperature, they go through what's called recrystallization, where the crystalline communities realign themselves back into those nice, tight crystalline communities, and the gaps in between them open up again, and the metal becomes soft again. So you might have heard that called annealing, which is technically accurate, but annealing, you could do it in either direction. You could do it to soften the metal, or you can do it to harden the metal. But what we're doing requires that ability of the metal to realign the crystalline communities to happen. If you had two pieces of metal that melt at a certain temperature, so we'll say sterling silver melts at, and I'm going to use Fahrenheit here. Sorry, I don't have the Celsius numbers right off the top of my head, so I'm going to use Fahrenheit numbers. Sterling silver melts at 1640 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you have two pieces of sterling silver together that you want to join together, if you put another piece of metal between them, another alloy, and an alloy is just a fancy word for a metal that's made up of more than one other metal. If you put an alloy in between them that melts at a lower temperature than the sterling does, then what happens is you can heat the sterling silver pieces to the point where the metal in between on top, which is called solder, well, you call it solder, the solder becomes liquid, and it's past the point of recrystallization, so the solder actually flows into the crystalline structure of the two pieces of sterling silver, and then when it cools, it all cools as a single solid matrix, and it's all joined together in one, theoretically, one piece of metal. After you've done soldering it, you can hammer it, you can stretch it, you can do whatever you want, and it's not going to break apart because it's now ostensibly all one piece of metal after it's soldered. So I think that's enough science for now. There's going to be more in between. But I know you guys want to see fire. I've got some silver solder here, and we only have this in wire form. I'm not a big fan of wire form. I prefer sheet solder or flat solder. So all I did was I just took this I just took a hammer, nice smooth, hammer, and hammered that, obviously not on the ceramic board, on a steel block, to flatten that up. So I've got a nice, little piece flat solder. I'm just gonna cut a chip of that off here. You guys see that? I don't know. It doesn't need much. That's probably even bigger than I need, but neither here nor there. Now, ultimately, I'm going to take this setting, and I'm going to put this in the shank of the ring, and do it like that. Oh, you know what? I have a customer who's become kind of a friend, good customer, who informed me that having the stones parallel with the shank of the ring is more fashionable now. So that's what I'm going to do. You know what? I can't. I just can't do it. I have to do it perpendicular. Sorry. That's my jam. So I'm going to do it this way, just because that's kind of more traditional. Who cares about fashion? Right? So these pegs just hold right in, right? It just slides right in there. That, sits beautifully. The peg, I don't know if you could see that, extends a little bit inside that thing, and we'll just polish that out later when it's done. you know, but that's all there is to get these things, you know, together, to sit together. Um, Now, when you're soldering alloys that have copper in them, and sterling silver, of course, we all remember is an alloy more or less 92 and a half. No, it has to be 92.5% silver, and the other 7.5% is usually almost all copper. Um, Copper loves oxygen, and if you just leave a piece of sterling silver out in the atmosphere, we all know that eventually it'll tarnish. A little thing that creates the copper and the oxygen binds together and creates cupric oxide, which is that tarnish on the surface, which these polishing cloths remove. This black stuff on there, that's almost all, probably all copper and oxygen bound together. Um, if you add heat to a chemical reaction, it normally accelerates, happens a lot faster. So if you put a torch, which we're going to use, on a piece of sterling silver, the surface turns black. It just completely covers the surface, and that cupric oxide creates kind of like a skin on the surface of the metal that doesn't allow the solder to flow past it into the crystalline structure of the metal. So you need to keep the surfaces that you want to solder together free of that cupric oxide. We have another chemical agent in there that we're going to introduce to it. I got some flux. And then lots of different kinds of flux. I am really partial to and this bit is going to last me forever, a long time. I think I got this on Amazon. I don't know what this is, like a pound or something. Of the white paste flux, the brazing fluxes. I find they're a lot more reliable. You can keep the heat on them a little bit longer before they get burnt off, and then you start getting that cupric oxide. Now you can do all kinds of things. I've seen people make this, mix this up with some alcohol and dip the whole piece in there, you know, and then set it on fire so it all dries. I don't know, lots of different things you can do. I'm not going to get too in the weeds, but there are other considerations. Fire scale is the thing that is a problem. Fire scale is not tarnish, is not cupric oxide. It's something totally different. Cupric oxide, the black stuff on the surface, is just on the surface. Fire scale is what happens when the metal becomes so hot that it begins to become, it starts to become liquid, and then the copper that's in the alloy begins to become oxidized. And once you get that in there, you'll see like a weird shading, a little weird shadows that you cannot polish out. So, you know, some people like to cover their whole piece in flux. I don't. But there's no right way or no wrong way. There's just a way or another way. So I'm going to get a little bit of flux here. Oh, that's a lot. I'm going to put this on that post there. Oh, that's good. It's nice and watery. And I'm going to put a little bit on this post on the back of that. Push that right down on there. Make sure that's nice and straight and level. That looks good. I could probably just angle this right up like this, can't I? Yeah. Nice. Move that a little bit closer. Oops. And I've got my little chip of solder there. Let me put it on the side here so you can see it. Okay. So I don't know if you could see that, but there's a nice little chip of solder right there. I've got my ring set up, you know, upside down. There's a couple different styles of settings that you may not be able to do this where you can put this upside down, but I think that's the most effective way to do it. I'm going to move that piece of lapis out of the way so I don't set it on fire. And I've got I've got a little butane torch here. This is just a regular old little craft torch, an old butane torch. Works, you know, pretty great. You can get this kind. You can get any kind of torch works. I've seen people use those little pen torches, you know, and real jewelers, real jewelers scoff at them and say,
No picture.
No picture. What?
Oh yeah, it's okay.
What?
It's okay.
Okay. No technical difficulty. Thought we had them for a minute. Don't poo-poo those little, you know, pencil torches, because the nozzle at the end is the same as it is in any of these other torches. It's just the gas chamber is only as big as the pen is, you know. So these are great. There's the refillable with butane torch, right? There's a little nozzle underneath. Um, I got this one on Amazon. I think it was like $22 Canadian or something. So really crazy inexpensive. You know, you're welcome to buy one of those Blazer torches that are like $100, and they'll probably last longer than one of these will. I don't know that it'll last 5 times longer than one of these will, but maybe. You never know. You know, uh, never talk badly about somebody who wants to spend a lot of money on really good tools. Um, you know, uh, one note of just a note to bene here on these things. These kind of torches, when you're filling them up, I've seen people do this all kinds of ways, holding the butane sideways and you think, hold this upside down, and when you're filling it, you know, hold it, because the butane when it's in the can in the reservoir here is a liquid. So if you're turning it sideways, it's just going to sputter out, sort of thing, before it's full. Hold it upside down and push that down, and then you really should wait, you know, 5 or 10 minutes before you use it, because a lot of times when you first fill them, they'll be a little over full, and then when you turn the torch on, sometimes you get, you know, the flames shooting out. Uh, I think the other torch I brought, just in case, does that. But anyway, neither here nor there. Oh, thanks. Just to show you what it looks like when that happens. Right? That so, but they'll calm down and they become good after a while. Okay, so um, I've got my ring, I've got my setting, I've got my flux on there, I've got my torch. I'm going to heat this. Now, the idea is not to just put the torch on the solder and melt the solder, because, yeah, the solder will melt first, but yeah, the solder will melt first, but what will happen is that the solder will reach the melting temperature of the solder, and the sterling silver hasn't reached the melting temperature of the solder. Now, this is a medium silver solder. It's an alloy of like 70% silver and 30% other metals. I'm not sure which ones they are off the top of my head, but I can check. Anyway, this alloy, it's a silver alloy, but it melts at a much lower temperature than the sterling silver does. Like I said at the beginning, sterling silver melts at 1640 degrees. The silver solder melts at 1360 degrees. So you got about 300 degrees difference between the point where the solder will begin to melt and flow and the point where you'll begin to melt the sterling. Now, all metals have two numbers associated with them when you're talking about melting them. There's the melting point, and then there's the flow point. And there's normally not much of a difference between them all, but you've got to get, and that 1360 for the silver solder, that's the flow point. So you've got to heat the pieces of sterling silver to 1360 degrees. So the solder becomes liquid and flows into the crystalline structure of the piece. If the silver doesn't reach the flow temperature of the solder is just going to melt and stick to the surface like the low temperature solders do. And then as soon as you try to do something with it, like I'm going to set a stone in there later, you'll just break the setting right off, sort of thing. So the idea of soldering, like I said, isn't so much to melt the solder, although that does happen as a byproduct of what you're doing. The most important thing to remember is that you're heating the silver all the way up to the temperature that the solder will melt and flow into the crystalline structure of it. And obviously that has to be higher than the melting temperature of the solder. Now, if just as an aside, if you're watching this from Europe, eventually, when I say solder, I mean solder. I know that people in Europe pronounce it. They pronounce the L. We don't do it in North America. We just pronounce it solder. And I know that solder means something totally inappropriate in some countries. I know in England for sure, but it's the alloy, the silver solder alloy that we're using. And I'm going to call it solder. I'm sorry. That's just the way I am. I'm stalling because I want this flux here to dry out. Because before it dries out, it'll jump around a little chip of solder as it melts and it goes through the, because you thin this with water, the flux with water. When it gets dried out, you just add a little water and, stir it up again. Yes, I guess ostensibly you're meant to use distilled water, but no, I just use tap water. It's fine. Um, Again, there's no wrong way, right? There's a way or another way. Okay, I'm going to put the heat on there. I'm going to heat up the ring first to start, and then I'm going to put the heat down on that setting. And then I'm going to, once everything looks like it's getting ready to start melting, or once the solder looks like it's beginning to start melting, I'm going to put the heat right on that little joint where the post is sticking up, right? Okay, oops, wrong camera. Okay, here we go. Uh, Heating the ring, the ring. Oh, love that. It turns a little kind of goldy thing. That's just before it starts to get to the temperature that it's going to melt. There's that solder melting. Come on, you can flow. See the solder? Oh, there you go. Gorgeous. And that's it, right? So, just before, let me get that other camera thing. Just before the solder flows, right? A lot of times you'll see the solder, curl up into a ball or form up into a ball. What's happening is the solder has reached its melting point, but the sterling hasn't reached the flow point yet. So the solder is a piece of liquid. Liquid always tries to pull itself into a sphere. Surface tension. Tried to think of the word. Surface tension tries to pull the liquid into a sphere, so it'll turn up like a little tiny dot. Don't take the heat off when that happens. Don't say, "Oh no, I failed." Just keep the heat on there. More heat, more heat. Let the heat spread out into the pieces, and eventually, when you see that sphere melt into a puddle and spread out, that's when you know that the solder has reached, or the sterling has reached a temperature that the solder will flow into it, and that's what you've done. So here's my piece. It's all soldered together. This is all one piece now. Yeah, it's all ugly and gross. Well, not ugly and gross. I think it's gorgeous. I'm just going to quench this in a little water. Generally, don't quench this right away when it's still super hot, because you'll do the opposite of annealing. You'll reach a point where if it's at the right temperature, and it's kind of rare to get it exactly the right temperature, but if you get it at just the right temperature, it'll shock the metal, and you'll end up with the metal getting really hard and brittle again. Letting it cool, air cool slowly, a minute or so. Lets that. Golly, look at how that's good. Perfect. Okay, so now obviously this, the places that there were no flux on the sterling silver got all black and gross. I'm just going to throw this into, let me see if there's a bigger, no, this one. No, you can't see it here either. So I've got a little crock pot with pickle. Maybe I can move this over to show you. Yeah, take it right out that. Right? Little crock pot. There's your ring. Doesn't take long. Takes like a minute or so. And the pickle that I'm using is sodium bisulfate. It's just you buy it as a white powder. You can get it. Jeweler supplies have it, but if you want to pay less, go to like a pool supply place that does stuff for swimming pools, because that's the stuff that you put. I think depending on the thing, if it's like a 10,000 gallon pool, I think you're supposed to put like a tablespoon or something in it to change the acidity of the water. Here, we're using a lot more than that. It's pretty concentrated. I just put a little bit of water in my little crock pot and turn it on so it's nice and warm, because all of these chemical reactions happen a lot faster when they're warm. And I just keep adding some until it doesn't dissolve as well, sort of thing. So this is all soldered together, and I'm going to show you this now because this is very cool. So this is going to be a pain in the bum. Okay, hold on. Okay, let me get that to focus on that. So you can see this is all clean of that cupric oxide. It's not very shiny though. When you put sterling silver in pickle, um, the copper begins dissolving um, faster than the sterling does. So you end up with the surface, instead of being nice and smooth, which, I mean, I guess if you just put your finger on it, it would feel smooth. But if you were to look at it under a microscope, you would see little tiny microscopic pits where the copper parts of the alloy started to become pulled out of the sterling, because it's copper and the oxygen binding together, and the pickle dissolves those copper and oxygen. Now, in the pickle, the oxygen just dissolves and evaporates into the atmosphere, but the copper molecules will stay in that pickle forever. And eventually, the pickle, you just obviously keep reusing it. And if be careful how you dispose of that. If you, whatever, look up your local regulations about this kind of thing. But the pickle will turn eventually, after using it for a couple of weeks, or I guess depending on how often you use it, it'll begin to turn blue, and that blue in there is copper. Now, I mean, you couldn't see because I did the thing, whatever, but when I fished the stuff out of the pickle, I used plastic tweezers. You've got to use plastic tweezers or copper tongs to pull stuff out of there. You don't want to put any steel tweezers in the pickle, because when you put steel in an acid, some kind of acids, definitely this kind of acid, the steel creates an electrical charge, and you end up creating what's ostensibly a plating bath. And if I were to, I mean, this is brand new pickle, so it probably wouldn't work. It would be contaminated, but it probably wouldn't work. But if your pickle is really, really used, well used, and blue, before you throw it out, keep it and hold on to it. And then you never know. Sometimes you might want, if you're working with copper solders, sometimes those solders don't turn out very coppery. They look a little gray. You can put your stuff in a pickle and throw some steel nails or something in there. And it'll plate the 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 piece, so it'll look all copper. Now you definitely don't want copper plating on this, so don't use a copper or plastic tweezers. Now I'm just going to take a minute and let me see. What's the best way to show you this? I'm going to polish this, and I've got my flex shaft with this is just a muslin bob, and I've got this some polishing material, right? This whatever. Just gonna get some of this on there. Oh, what's going on? Have I accidentally switched it off? I did. So I'm just gonna charge up this up with some of that stuff, and I can do this here, right? I'm a big fan of muslin bob, but you can use felt too. Some people like felt ones better. I like the muslin. I know that when you first start using them, you get little stringy bits that fly everywhere. And if you've ever wondered why your friends who are jewelers, why their fingers are always dirty, this is why. There's no way to do this without getting your fingers dirty. Unless you wear rubber gloves, I guess you could do that. Okay, now there's that little problematic uh, post down on the bottom of that. And I'm just going to get rid of it. Oh, I put those here. I've got some rubber grinding wheels, right? This is just that one of those rubber Craytex wheels. Let me show you one. I'll show you a pretty one, pretty color one, right? You know, just one of those. Any jeweler supply have them. And this is a real coarse one, so I'm just going to use that to. I can tell you right now, every one of my students from 25 years of classes are looking at me right now and saying, Mark, why aren't you wearing your optivisors? Now I can see. Anyway, we'll call that good. I don't want to take all the time doing that, but that's all we need to do. Okay, we'll call that good. Now, as far as setting the stone in here, I've got this. So, I mean, this is it. That's it. That's all there is to it. Soldered. Boom. What did that take? 10 minutes? And it only took so long because I stopped and explained every little subtle nuance of what I'm doing. So, just going to pop that stone right in there. And then we got a ring clamp to hold on to that. Tighten that bad boy up. And then I'm just going to, push those closed. I've just got a little stone setting bezel pusher. And when you're setting a stone, I always keep the tip of that stone setting bezel pusher flush with the end of my thumb, and I anchor my thumb onto whatever I'm anchoring. So if I'm on a table or on a rubber block, I'll do that. But on this, I'm going to anchor this on the ring clamp, and the ring clamp is just a clamp for the ring. Hence the name ring clamp, just to hold that in place. So it gives me a lot bigger piece to hold on to than just that little tiny ring. It's just much easier on your hands. And I'm just going to push these in one by one. I think that's it. Well, golly, that's just way cool. Right? Gorgeous. Cute little ring. No waiting. No muss, no fuss. Now, like I said before, we have these settings in lots of different styles. And I'm going to show you them. Now, I'm going to take a minute and show you all of them. This one, obviously, is the one that I was just using, right? That gallery, cage, gallery wire thing. We've got I'm just going to show you just like the biggest ones, just so you can see them. These are ovals, right? So this is one with 4 little stars that hold the stone in, right? Awesome for cabochon. Obviously, you couldn't use this for a cut stone. Same with the other one, the one that I just used. But then we've also got the more traditional, I guess, crown basket settings, right? I got this one, right? And these are the ones, these basket settings are the ones that we've got in every size from 3mm up to 14mm. Um, you know, so, and it's another one. Just again, 4 nice tall prongs on that. Very simple, very classic. Oh, sorry. Um, Here's an oval version of that same one, right? Just four, pretty good prongs. So if you're doing, cabochons, I notice a lot cabochons that you see really high domes. These would be awesome for that, kind of thing. Um, and there's another more traditional basket setting. You can see that, right? This, depending on the shape of the pavilion, would be awesome for cut stones, but would also work for cabochons. Here's a round version of that same, basket setting, right? And here's a round version of that oval crown gallery, that setting that I used, right? So for cabs or cut stones, you've got what you need. Here's something else I want to show you. And I'm going to pull one out of the bag because we've got these Tiffany sort of settings, again, in everything from 3mm to 14mm. This is the ones that this style of ring, you know, works great on. Some of the other ones, I don't think they clear the top of those prongs, but this, put that in there, right? It's just seriously gorgeous, right? And with the rings, we've got these ring shanks, and I don't know if I said before, we've got every size from 5 all the way up to, or full size. We don't have half sizes in these, but every size from 5 to 13. So even if you have giant fingers like me, you can find rings, that will fit on that. That one, I think there's another one that works in there that I think it's not really supposed to work in that. Obviously, some of these basket settings, right? If the size is smaller than, what is that? This one is too big. I think that if the size fits in there, so everything up to probably 8mm or so, will fit in those rings. You just have to be careful how you orient the prong so it's easy to set. But that's it. Those jewelry settings are on the website. If you look at the menu bar, there's I think it's under jewelry settings. Jewelry settings is what they're called. Now the awesome thing about these jewelry settings is that we built these so that it would be super easy. Just buy a ring, buy a thing, solder it together, polish it up, boom, set the stone, and you're done. But if you're able to do this, then you're able to solder, and the idea is And I don't think I've ever seen anybody carry as many different styles and sizes of just straight up settings that you can use to solder onto something else. So, like I said before, no matter what you're making, if you're an experienced metalsmith and you're making these beautiful, elaborate, I don't know, whatever you want, bracelets or pendants or cuffs or armor, and you want to decorate them. You want to add some stones, some little, nuances here and there. You want a stone up in the corner or something, whatever. As long as you have the stone, you have the measurement. You can buy one of these settings to just solder to the piece. You just have to snip that little tag, the little post off the back. To snip the little post off the back, solder it to whatever. You don't have to use them the way these are, built. The way they're were originally, I guess, designed for, right? So having that um, little hole is great. It just makes it super easy to connect it all together and hold it all together. Because I promise you, one of the most maddening things, especially with rings, because it is usually such a very small shank to solder it onto. It's always tricky to get that everything to sit nicely together, and you can use your third hands to hold onto pieces or whatever you want. Uh, but they're always tricky to solder, right?
This is for
Um,
pendant, for ring,
so,
for
all
earring,
right.
pendant or earring settings.
So obviously we've got lots of other of these kind of things. Some square and pendant ones. I think these. I got a couple of marquise settings here. These don't have that post in the bottom, that peg in the bottom. Um, but these are designed specifically to be soldered to other things, right? Got this lovely little baguette setting, right? There's no bail, there's no loops, it's just the setting. And that was a concept that we were going for um, with these things. Oh, yeah, there's more. Um, uh, there's some of those. I know we have a whole set of, or whole series of
Different
these
sizes.
these
Yeah.
these basket settings. Um, Great for cut stones, and again, different sizes, everything up from 4 by 6, or no, 3 by 5, all the way up to, I guess, the same. It's almost the same, 13 by 17. Yeah, and just plain another gallery settings, right? So these were basically the starting point that we went with when we were developing those jewelry settings. Um, But then, of course, Marble never does anything halfway. You had to go like extreme. So we've got like 9 different styles in 8 or 10, no, 12 different sizes for every style. Um, so it will be pretty rare, I think, for you to have a stone that you can't find a setting for. Uh, I love these rings. I just think they're great. You can definitely take these kind of things and set whatever stones you want into them. Sell them at little shows at a little craft fair or whatever. Um, Bobby would like a Tiffany setting. Yeah, what size? Because we've got them in everything from. Yeah, I guess everything from 3 millimeter to 14 millimeter. Um, I guess my point is, if you were to make something like this, I personally would have no problem of you telling your customers, "I made this." Yeah, you didn't make the setting, uh, and you didn't make the components, right? But how many jewelers actually make the components? Almost none. Um, there's a big market for those kind of settings for jewelry. Um, and we want to be the place that supplies you with them. So it's a little bit of a departure from the standard, pendants that are ready. Just pop your stone in, push the prongs in, and boom, and there you go. It requires a little more fabrication experience. You need to know how to solder.
More
So
fun.
I think it's way more fun. Who doesn't like playing with fire? It's like one of the most fun things you can do. Um, Plus, I think, you know, stringing beads and everything and setting stones is fine. But as soon as you put a torch in your hand, all of it, now you're a real jeweler. You know, before it was, yeah, I'm a hobbyist. I'm a thing. Say now you put a torch, I'm doing it for real. And I'm joking, of course. Don't. Uh, and a ring. Um, which kind of ring, Bobby? You say you're asking for a Tiffany setting and a ring. We just need to know what size ring and what kind of ring. Do you want the wide band, like the one I did the sample with, right? That thing doesn't fit on my hand because that's only a size 8 ring, and my fingers are like size 13. Um, right, that band, or there's a little bit of a thinner band. There's like a 2 millimeter band, which is a little daintier, I think. And or we've got this ring that's really made specifically for that Tiffany setting, which I kind of love that. I think that's great. Um, so just I guess Marble will get a hold of you in the comments, and uh, we'll ask you what kind of ring shank you want, what size you want, and what kind of settings you want. How many? You should get some of each. There's no wrong way because you're always going to find some stones that you want to put on somewhere, and we have the way to make that happen for you. So I guess that's it. Oh, golly, I almost got to an hour. I think I'm like 4 minutes shy of an hour. I thought this was going to be way quicker, but hopefully that was helpful for you. There was some good science in there. Hopefully you didn't fall asleep in the science parts, but it's always important to know what's happening so you can troubleshoot later and say, what did I do wrong? What did Mark say about that? Oh, right, I don't have flux in the right place, or I'm not getting it hot enough. That's the biggest thing. People, they solder and they're really timid with the heat. When you're first learning soldering, put aside a few things that you're specifically planning on melting, and just get used to how the metal changes, shape and how the light. I have a square, oval, and faceted stone I just bought. Would you have a Tiffany setting that would work for those? Uh, a square, oval, and faceted stone. The Tiffany settings we have are for round stones, but I'm just trying to think if there would be a reason why. No, you couldn't put a square stone in that unless you put the points uh, sticking out the sides, like in between, and the prongs held onto the flat edges, but they're not really designed for that. And no, we don't have square settings of those. Ovals, we got lots. And when you say faceted stone, I just need to know how big the stone is. If you have a good caliper, just measure the outside diameter of the stone. If it's round, you only need one measurement, right? Because it's the same every direction. If it's an oval, I need the widest point on the sides and the widest point at the top and the bottom. And so X by Y is how we measure the settings. Um, but yeah, we can do that. Definitely. Uh, Maybe we'll get a hold of you off stream and try to ascertain exactly what stones you've got and what sizes you've got. Um, but I'm glad you like those Tiffany settings. I like them too. Big fan of them. So I was trying to get off because now I am approaching the hour. Thanks for joining us. I think, obviously, all those same rules apply if you, anything that you order during the live stream, or I guess while you're online here, 10% off the retail, not the wholesale, 10% off the retail prices, and free regular mail shipping, not expedited, not tracked, nothing like that. Um, and we will see you, I guess, next week. Now, I was so frantic trying to get everything together for this thing that I haven't planned what we're going to do next week. But I think we're going back to, doing some pendants, talking about some pendants. But we'll let you know. It'll be, somewhere you'll get a notification somewhere what it's going to be next week. But there will be something next week. We do this obviously every weekend, every Wednesday from 10:30 Pacific time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. We like when you join us live, but if you want to watch this later, a lot of people watch this after the fact, which is always great. Think they'll be surprised this week to see some cool, technique going on there. Obviously, if you have any questions about anything that I talked about today, any other, jewelry making techniques, I taught jewelry fabrication for 25 years. So wide. So the wider ring. Is that right? We'll get a, sorry, Bobby, we'll get a hold of you off stream, find out what exactly you need. Uh, Again, thanks for joining us this week. We will see you again next week. Sylvia Findings live stream on Facebook, hopefully on YouTube soon. Not sure what we're doing, but we'll see you somewhere. We'll see you everywhere. Take care. Take care of yourself. Take care of the planet. Take care of your mental health. Be creative. Just keep making stuff. And bye. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay.